I'm Mike Doherty. I'm happy to be a black hat. I'm a medical guy. I've been in medicine for 30 years. I'm the CEO of LabMD. I'm from Michigan. I live in Atlanta. After a 7-year battle with the government and people that took our patient file, it's incredible that I'm actually standing here. And I appreciate your time and attention. I'm going to talk about what's gone on now that we've had just in 2015 alone. 93 million patients have been victims of identity theft in the healthcare setting, just in 2015. But why has the Federal Trade Commission decided to come after LabMD, a company that had at the most 10,000 patients potentially taken, which I'll talk about later, and how they use that. This is not an axe grinding session. This is an education session about an insider view of everything I've learned about how the government really works. And what I'm learning is villainy wears many masks. None more dangerous than the mask of virtue. And that's what LabMD came up against, a villain masquerading as virtue. A leviathan of unlimited means and strength, the pseudo-protector of the people, commonly known as the FTC. And LabMD's battle with the FTC is a story of government interference, Big Brother run amok, and bureaucrats and lawyers totally lacking in the technical expertise for their positions of power. And that's probably one of the most important things I talk about when I speak about this is in medicine and technology, we need to be regulated by people that know what's going on in the industry and have expertise in that area. Otherwise, it's bull in the china shop. This put 40 people out of work, and when the company folded because of this, and it impacts every one of us because this is essentially how they roll. I am not here, again, to grind an axe. I feel like I'm kind of on the Titanic screaming iceberg, you know, and I hope this talk shatters your assumptions about the rights that we think we have because the FTC, like most agencies, have playbooks that are top secret. Now, to speed up time, because I've got 7 years to cram into 45 minutes, I got a 3-minute video that I think will save us a lot of time, and selfishly, I want you to see the medical laboratory. So he's going to play a video real quick, and that'll probably let us condense this to get to information that I think you guys need to hear about really the government more than us.
We're about 20 employees. We diagnose cancer for urologists all around the country. Tissue comes in, we process it, our physicians on staff diagnose it. Things are going quite well. Out of the blue, the phone rings. It's a gentleman from a company in Pennsylvania called Tyversa. We had no idea who that was. His name was Robert Bobek. He said he was the CEO, and that he had found one of our files on a peer-to-peer network. We wanted to know how we got it, and I didn't trust this at all. So I wanted to make sure that he only communicated with us in writing so we could have some sort of paper trail. He emailed the file, and it was a billing file from our billing department, 9,000 patients in there with their patient name, date of birth, social security number, insurance information, everything we needed to know to file insurance. We ran up the billing department and we found the workstation because it was a report that was clearly off the manager's workstation, and we found software there, LimeWire. That was terrifying. She used it to listen to music. The employee had no idea she was making any type of patient information vulnerable. She was violating policy by listening to music, and in that folder were 800 and some odd music files in this report, and about 38 patient files, but they're all redacted out, except for this one with 9,000 and one other with one patient. We were just amazed how this could happen, and it was something seemed amiss. So we started asking questions. The first logical question is, where did you get it? And then how'd you get it? And then what's the IP address? And as soon as we got to the IP address, there was a little bit of a shakiness in the response. And they said, well, we're going to have to hire them via a services agreement. He would have to get us a bid and see if it's possible. This is a red flag. We called our lawyers and immediately wanted to make sure the patients were fine. The first thing was, let's close down any vulnerabilities that are there, if they're there, and look to see if we can find the file anywhere and see if it's spread anywhere. We are aghast at what's going on. One of who has got this. It's not outside the cyberspace. We don't find it anywhere. We turn our attention back to Mr. Balvick. In his email communications, he's seductively trying to act like the nice guy and warning us that the spread could continue the longer we waited to hire them to look for it. In the meantime, we see no evidence that it's out there. We don't know who he is, and he won't tell us anything unless we pay him. So we told him to go away and only call our lawyers, which he did in late 2008. His lawyer contacted our lawyers and said, we're going to turn this over to the Federal Trade Commission. We found that interesting and said, fine, go ahead, turn it over to the government. A year and a half later, we got a call from the FTC. It was just this creepy feeling like we were being watched.
Miss out the shameless plug.
Be sure to subscribe to my social media outlets at LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube.
That's it. Sorry about the shameless plug. It's a multitasking video.
It's all yours.
Thank you. Okay, so I just want to bring up really fast because that little piece can take half an hour. And 2009 then was the, keep in mind, 2008, 2009 then, we're just wondering where is it out there? We have this creepiness because we don't find it. I have 4 full-time IT people in-house and we're looking for it and we're not finding it anywhere. Then in 2010 in January, the phone rings and it's Alan Shear with the Federal Trade Commission who says, hi, we've got a file of yours and we are going to start a non-public inquiry. We knew immediately who that was from. He said we'll be getting a letter the next day. And the game started. 11 pages single space arrived on our doorstep. And you know, we are in a heavy regulated industry in medicine. We have a great relationship with regulators. I am not anti-regulation, but I am very anti lack of transparency and guessing game with regulations. We want to know what to do, and then we do it. And we want to know what we're screwing up, and then we fix it. That's not the game that was played by the FTC. Right off the bat, we're getting overwhelmed with demands. The lawyer clock is ticking. We have, 40 employees. My inner circle of management only knew about this, and really we're freaked out, and the lawyer's wondering what the heck's going on. Right off the bat, the FTC is in the press, and they are saying they have widespread data breaches uncovered by an FTC probe. This is a pattern of the FTC using the media to play like the savior. They warn of improper release of sensitive consumer data on P2P file sharing networks. They've notified 100 organizations almost about personal information. Sensitive data about customers, employees, shared from organizations' computer networks and is available on peer-to-peer file sharing networks. So they are fast to the press before they notify you. Now, I'm trying to figure out who Tyversa is. We get flown to D.C., we meet the FTC, and that face-to-face meeting was very alarming because, again, I've grown up, by the way, in a law enforcement world. Both my parents were police officers when they met. So my whole childhood, which now seemed in my 50s to matter, was with judges and police officers and lawyers. And so I'm surprised by the behavior of what's going on because they're just not telling us what we're doing wrong or what we're doing right. And they seem to be relying, obviously, on Tyversa. And I start doing research. And I find that Tyversa is boasting of having unique technology that can search incredibly quickly between 300 and 1.8 billion searches per day. And they put out a paper that says they've downloaded 13.8 million files, that they're working with Dartmouth on the paper, and they're monitoring 48 million workstations worldwide. And they're turning this over to the FTC. Now, this is 2009, so the press didn't pick up a thing. And this is all going on behind our back, and I'm finding out Homeland Security gave $24 million to Dartmouth that used Tyversa, and they're all bragging about this Save the World thing. And evidently, I have very bad odds because I was 1 out of 13.8 million. So I wonder, how does the FTC get this power? And I have to go back to basics civics, right? So we have the executive branch, the judicial branch, and we have the legislative branch, with the Founding Fathers split in two so that laws were difficult to create over us. But about 100 years ago, it's not about who's president or what party you are from. That's not what this is about. We have the fourth branch of government, the agency, administrative process. And what I learned, because I kept railing against my lawyer, like, how can they do this? The freedoms from everyone, the sort of limitations of government are the separations between the branches. But in the agencies, they are allowed to have their own courts, their own rules, their self-policing, and that I consider a fist of power. And because my lawyer kept saying, doesn't matter if it's out, doesn't matter. And when I speak to other lawyers in D.C., it was like I was diagnosed with a terminal disease. They were like, oh, you're dead, roll over. I'm like, but they won't say we did wrong. They're not proving it's out. I was just incredulous. And I consider that type of centralization of power a petri dish for corruption, and grow it did. Because I'm learning that the bureaucrats had scant experience in worlds they regulate. That was very bizarre to me coming from medicine, where everyone in medicine that regulates is a pathologist or a histotech or someone. And here we have people that have just gone to law school. That's it. And they're more concerned with the interpretation of the truth. So how'd this start? So the official agenda of the FTC is Section 5 of the FTC Act by Congress that says their job is to protect consumers from unfairness and deception. Now, I'm skipping over deception because that wasn't our game. We did not have patients come in. They were at us for unfairness, and they're saying a practice is unfair where it causes or is likely to cause substantial injury to consumers, cannot be reasonably avoided by consumers, and is not outweighed by countervailing benefits to consumers or competition. Seems like fair enough, but the problem was, who decides what is likely to cause? Who decides what is reasonably to avoid? Who decides what is a countervailing benefit? They do. And that was terrifying to me. And evidently I wasn't alone, but there had been at this point 37 consent decrees signed by various companies throughout the country, although no one was medical, so they didn't have that much to lose. But if I'm holding cancer results for hundreds of thousands of people, and it is out there that I'm questionable and that I'm not doing a good job, we're dead. We're dead way earlier than TJ Maxx or Sony. So I had to figure out what were my odds here and what to do, because we were under attack. And sure enough, one of the commissioners had reported that Section 5 has administrative process advantages. In the past 20 years, the FTC has ruled in favor of staff, meaning their in-house courts, on appeal in 100% of the cases. And the win rate for appealing when they go outside is 50%. So they lose half the time when you get outside their own court. So there's something wrong. But they run to gaslighting. They repeatedly say, we're the cybersecurity regulator. We're the regulator. We're the decider. And quite frankly, folks, it's such a treacherous road to fight that most people roll. And then you've got this reputation thing against you, but it's the lesser of two evils. They want you to be afraid. And at this point, they wouldn't tell us what we could do right or wrong, but every time we tried to inquire, they said you have to sign a consent decree. Look at these prior consent decrees. And what the FTC wants is they want you to sign a 20-year agreement where deep in the fine print it says you're admitting no wrongdoing. But they'll have press releases all over the place about how they've snagged another one, and it's at your expense. You are going to have to pay about $250,000 a year. And then you're also open to all sorts of attack if you don't comply. As, you know, whether you think LifeLock deserves it or not, the one thing I want to, if you're familiar with the LifeLock thing that hit the press a couple of weeks ago where they're going back against them, notice how they seal the argument. So LifeLock's getting attacked in the press, their stock goes down 50%, but no one knows why. It's classic. So there was no way I was going to sign a consent decree. There just wasn't going to happen because it was reputation assassination at a much greater level, and I didn't know the road I was going to be embarking on was going to land me here or on the radio, TV, or writing, but life's an adventure. I guess I'm an entrepreneur, so that's okay. But I saw this whole thing as a shakedown, and I saw this whole thing as secret law. When they're not telling you what you have to do, it's a secret. And I had to figure out what was going on here. It was amazing to me, especially where I came from. And in medicine and technology, we have this common enemy right now about these bullies that are outside attacking everybody, when most of the time our regulatory processes are collaborative. This whole punitive thing is just so foreign in medicine. I mean, we just don't, if you play punitive, no one's going to pick up a scalpel or diagnose anything. I mean, there's just not perfection. And they don't use you to put your head on a spike and scare everyone else into submission. But the FTC just wants you to assume the position. And it was constantly from the lawyers, don't upset them, don't upset them. And if you do, they're going to bury you in procedures and data, and they do think they're doing God's work. But if that doesn't work, they'll come at you. So I find out, again, we have Homeland Security involved, Dartmouth, and I am insisting they're in bed together. I'm telling my lawyers, well, I've cracked the case. They're in bed together. And they're like, no, it doesn't matter, because it's potential for harm. You can get this and you can't have anyone harmed. It doesn't have to have anything out there. But the public hears breach, hears violation, because what they're really doing is so unreal. I totally get it's hard to believe, because it's hard for me to believe. So I reach out to who I can reach out to, and I found Ben Wright at SANS. And he came in, he inspected, because of course the FTC is not going to tell me anything, and I had to know, it's driving me nuts. I mean, if we did something wrong, let's fix it. Let's get on with it. And he came in, and he said, this thing's not out of control. We now know a subcontractor working through a government contract has got it. It's nowhere else. Legally, a breach is not a breach. You don't have a breach here. This is not a legal breach, because, again, it's not spreading anywhere. And just the way Bobbitt had approached this years before was insane. And I never trusted. But then I find him in front of House Oversight testifying. The guy on the phone with us is on the phone. Is in front of House Oversight testifying. And who's next to him? His advisory board member, General Wesley Clark. And who else is on his advisory board? Howard Schmidt and Poneman. And there's the FTC. And there's LimeWire. I'm like, holy cow. This is unbelievable. I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time. And we're just a small business. So I'm trying to run around to fix it. Like, okay, if we did something wrong, let's fix it. There's no products out there. Again, now this is 2010. So we go to WebSense, and we spend tons of money for some solution, because they won't say what to do right. And we just want them to go away. We're playing really nice in front of them, but we just want them to go away. But if the moment comes to sign a consent decree, it's not going to happen. But we feel like they're just watching us, and you don't want to tick them off. And the other thing they'll tell you is, well, if you don't sign, we can always keep an eye on you, and we always will, and we can open the complaint up at any time. So you have the forever threat, and they're wearing you down. There's no court here. There's no justice. There's no yes, no. And I just couldn't do this. They asked us to sign a consent decree, and I couldn't do it. In many situations, I know many people should. I don't judge the corporations that did, but we were medicine, and it was going to send a terrible precedent. And I called this the long slog up Justice Mountain, and we started to fight. And right away, they screamed and yelled when we told them, no, we're not going to sign a consent decree, that they were going to sue us immediately, and they didn't sue us. They tried to get us to sit for more just excruciating depositions. My VP was there from like 10 in the morning till 8:30 at night one day, so they just wear you down. These people are ticked off. They have not heard no ever. And we are basically challenging their entire playbook, and they have a very short fuse about that. They take themselves very seriously, and off we went to court. And sure enough, the court said, nobody has really litigated your authority in this area to do this, although you apparently have done it a lot. This is just if they can make me sit down for a CID. And the FTC's response were, well, we've spoken on panels, we've conducted workshops, we've published guidance, as if that's law. So if you don't check the FTC website, folks, you better start doing it, because that's law, because they say so. That last time I checked, I thought Congress made the law. But sure enough, Congress has strapped the hands, and this is a big point, they've tied the hands of the courts. They don't want anyone intervening with administrative processes to regulate. And this isn't just the FTC. This is almost all regulators until they're done with you. And that is an opportunity for abuse. That's like, look, gun to the head. It's going to cost you millions of dollars. Reputation assassination. You might as well roll. And most companies roll. And even as much as he went after them, he could not he could not stop them from making me sit, because prior Supreme Court rulings, even back as in the 40s, said the government can make you sit down for almost anything because of the wordsmithing of the word plausible. Plausible means possible. Anything's possible. The cow might fly over the moon, so you can do it. And the judge was frustrated, but he had no choice. And I'm at this point all ticked off. I'm like, okay, the world's got to know this. This is just too unbelievable. I'm telling people not involved in law, and they're just thinking something's wrong with me. And the only way I figured out I could really do this is to write a book which is a big deal. What got them so ticked off. But I wrote the book, The Devil Inside the Beltway, because I had to write this nonfiction story to show everyone what really goes on. Because if I just tell you this, I just find it too amazing. And the big thing we have to understand is they are going at us with persecution through process. Now, they have the books coming out. They're royally ticked. We're now in 2013. They have basically so psychologically bombarded my staff because we have hired different law firms. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. We've got WebSense in there. They are just not happy they're going to sue us. And the book's coming, and it gets explained to me what their litigation strategy is. The FTC can take two options when they go at you. If they think they have a super strong case and they want to get this over with, they take you right to federal court. Federal court has to be in your location. But they could show you the rack, and the rack is the administrative process, because administrative courts is the courtroom at the FTC office, and it's the FTC judge, whose web address, by the way, is, email address is ftc.gov. And they drain you dry with all the finances, and the attention they take away from your business, and the reputation in the press, and they allow hearsay because they make their own rules because Congress says they can. So the investigators have new lawyers. So they don't have to tell you what they're finding because they invoke their own privilege because they say they can, and the courts say they can't intervene because Congress said they say they can. Am I making sense here? So they win 100% of the time, reputation assassination, psychological warfare, cooperative press because no one can believe this, damage operations, and we are toast. And what's really going on here is the FTC is creating common law, and the way they do it is A, get the consent decree, build precedent. Build precedent by the battery of now over 50 consent decrees. By the way, when they had their 50th consent decree, they had another party, another big press release. Yippee-yay, we beat up 50 companies. Avoid the courts. Build that mountain. Mislead and stonewall Congress when you come and say everything's wonderful. And play hero to the press. Because no one looks at the details these days, folks. I mean, it's really amazing how we just have such a short attention span. No one either wants to see or has the time to see. Ironically to me about this is the 50 biggest data breaches in healthcare, not one has resulted in FTC action. From Anthem down to North Carolina, where we're, 9, 10,000, maybe? That's assuming what they said is true, which we'll talk about later. But that's because lambs are easy to slaughter. And then comes the suit. And that is the FTC files a complaint against LabMD for failing to protect consumers' privacy. How did I find this out? The Associated Press called me up, woke me up. Oh, hey, you're being sued today. And they have this huge, it was a brilliant, I encourage you to look it up. It's brilliantly written because you'll notice it never says the word breach in it. But what did everybody hear? Everyone in the lay world tech? It's a breach. They had a breach. Try to fight that. So all this is to me is bullying behavior. And there are no shortage of people who think that you're guilty because the government accuses you. So suddenly you have the fun. I mean, employees are scared. People wondering what's going on. We're just a private company diagnosing cancer. Luckily, I knew a lot of physicians for such a long time. We didn't have a lot of people depart at this point. But this is where they love the dirty laundry. And they get the eyeballs on the set. They hang the company out to dry. They're going to gain political points. And they create a crisis so they can build corporations, and lawyers can build a corporation for legal advice. And there's a lot of people in that world that are feeding off this. But I had been working in D.C., and when I found out that Bobick and this crowd was talking to Congress all these years and testifying and blowing the smoke, come on, just because you win Congress does not mean you get 50 more IQ points. You become an expert in cybersecurity. So they were duping them on this, and these guys are taking this up hook, line, and sinker. So I start calling on oversight, not to save me, but to educate them. Because what would shock me, is there's not a lot of conversation between the agencies and Congress. They don't know what's going on, and few people run up and tell them because they're afraid. So I had nothing to lose. And at the same time, I met a government oversight law firm that does pro bono work to want to do accountability. So when they thought they were going to, take the lamb to slaughter, suddenly we put it was a surprise to them, I hope. That day we had a big press release of our own. Then they found out I did have pro bono legal firm from insiders in D.C. So the next step was shock and awe. 40 subpoenas, doctors, vendors, employees that left 6 years ago. People that work for me now and they make $15 an hour posting payments and they don't have a lawyer, never had a lawyer, and suddenly they're sitting in front of a federal investigator and they need to get one. This is just tyranny. This has nothing to do with any seeking of the truth. Still not telling us what we did wrong, by the way. They get to decide and they'll tell you later. But then we go to court and they stomp 20 people into the scheduling conference and they say how upset they are about the book because they don't like to be talked about. And then they say to the judge, this is amazing, the judge asks them, is there any place for businesses to go to know what to do? Quote unquote, out of the record, there is nothing out there for a company to look to. And they're fine with that. So then the depositions start, and the first deposition is Robert Bobick with Tyversa, and he drops a big surprise. Oh, now we find out that our files in 4 different locations around the world, and it wasn't downloaded in Georgia like he said in writing years before. No, he just saw it there. He must have misspoke. And they download it in San Diego. Now, why do you think he said that? We think he said that because it turns out it's illegal to surveil in Georgia without a private investigator license. So, it doesn't help the government to get evidence through crime if they're working with the criminal. That does not look good. And so all these people lost their job because then we folded. And we had a really dark 2013. Tyversa sued me for defamation. I had a personal family member pass away. We lost the company. People were jumping ship left and right. It was just terrifying. And then in the spring of 14, I guess you kind of say we had a miracle in the sense that we had a whistleblower come out. And this is because of the book, which is amazing. This is the part about life just being an adventure and kind of being patient. I got a call from a guy that used to work there, Richard Wallace, and he was terrified, and he was emotional, and he was apologetic and said, I've ruined everything. I've ruined this. I did this. We took that file. We lied to everybody. It's nowhere. And not only is it nowhere, does anyone remember in the room when Obama won and about a month later it was all over the news that his helicopter plans were found in Iran? Does anyone remember that? That's a lie. They found Obama's helicopter plans in a consultant's computer in Virginia, but it was too juicy not to fluff up. So they changed the metadata, made it look like an IP address in Iran, called the media, and the media, do you think the media checked it? Went nuts. NBC, seen all over the place. That got Congress's attention when we told them that was a lie. And suddenly Congress is investigating. So now we have... At this point, we're in uncharted territory because most people don't even get this far with the government. Now I have Congress looking into what's going on. I'm really enjoying myself, quite frankly, so because it's when you're taught that there's no hope and that you're alone in the world, and suddenly you're not crazy after 5 years. It's good, but what's terrifying is that the FTC is relying on these people that are saying they do billions of searches a day and they're monitoring and they've downloaded millions of files. So they go after that company and they said, hey, we want to know. We want everything you got. And what do? Tyversa says, no, we don't want to give it to you because we don't want to be associated by our clients thinking we're with the Fed. So the FTC is like, well, go ahead then and just create a third-party shell company. We'll call it the Privacy Institute. You just funnel it through there. Now, this is all in documented depositions under oath. No one denies this. The FTC worked with them. They create this funnel. Does it seem strange that a company that's doing billions of downloads for years in this world of cybersecurity leaks can only turn over 86 files to the government? Does the government even think about that that's kind of strange? Absolutely not, because the agenda is not truth. It is gaslighting. Their agenda is to find a victim, put a head on a spike, and scare all of you into compliance for some never land, and it's not going to work. Now, in the meantime, we're still trying to get the courts to intervene in this craziness. And now that we've got this going on, we think, well, the 11th Circuit will go back. And it's just the big point about what the judge says here, and these are quotes from the record, is the big deal is notice how the courts want to do something, and they're frustrated with this, but they can't. Our hands are tied together. Persecution through process. Congress says you can't intervene yet, and so these guys can get away with whatever they want. And most people evidently aren't as competitive or crazy as me. So he says there's already a history of acrimony, and I think behalf of the agency, the exertion of authority in a mean-spirited way. No kidding. That's for starters. The FTC is going into the business of monitoring, investigating, and regulatory security breaches, and they have decided to do that within what they believe is their administrative authority, but I think there's been no amendment to Section 5 to specifically allow that. But how do you find that out? You can't find it out unless you fight it. You can't fight it unless you have millions in time. Most people aren't going to do that, so they self-appoint the regulation. And you'll notice with the FCC net neutrality thing right now, the irony is all these agencies are self-appointing their technology regulation. No one's given to them, and now they're fighting with each other. Who's got internet net neutrality? Who's got this? Is it Homeland Security? Is it FCC? Is it FTC? We'll just have to crawl through the courts at millions. So then they're not verifying evidence. He says, so you've got no information established how these documents were obtained. Is that right? That's correct, Your Honor. That's what the FTC says to him. He's like, boy, that's a sad comment on your agency, that you would wait until months before a hearing, and months after you instituted an investigation, you have not taken any effort to interview the people who you claim had the documents that underlie the charge of a security breach. That strikes me as almost being unconscionable. So you don't know where the documents came from. You don't know how these people got the possession of it. You don't know whether they originate from LabMD. But you're going to use that to show that certain individuals were damaged by documents, the source of which you don't even know. And once again, the FTC. Yes, Your Honor. Holy cow. But here's the thing. Court can't do anything. Cannot. Says, no wonder you can't get this resolved. I don't think you believe that this is a company that willy-nilly allows information to be disclosed. We detect cancer. I also believe you don't think that is a good idea to make this provider unavailable to patients. I don't think they care, folks. They're fine with it. They are not apologetic even today, and this story gets way worse. There aren't that many people doing this work. One of the regrets of the industry is that there are so few people providing these services. Someday you are going to need one of those services. I hope it's available to you. And he ruled in their favor because the courts and Congress, the Supreme Court says he can't intervene yet. So he can beat them up, but the ruling is it's not right. He has to go by the law. So he kind of tells them what's coming. They know what's coming. Most people succumb by now. So off we go to kangaroo court. And in kangaroo court, I say that because they make up their own rules. They stack their own deck, and you don't even have to know really what they are. And right out the bat, the judge wants to know, where's the money? Where's the money? And he asks him, is this a non-government affiliated entity? And he goes, yes, it is. Are they funded in any way by taxpayer money? No, it's not. So he's saying Tyversa doesn't receive any money from the feds. That's a lie. They get money. They got cash from the FBI. They got money from the TSA. They had a contract. And months later, actually just 3 months ago, they bury in a brief, totally unrelated, page 6 of 30 pages, oh, by the way, Your Honor, we misspoke. Judge also said, hang on a second. You don't plan to introduce evidence of harm, but your position is that doesn't mean no harm occurred. Is that what you said? So that's correct. Do you plan to introduce evidence of actual penetration of the network? We're not going to introduce evidence of that sort as we're unable to determine if that happened. Does this seem crazy to you? It's all real. Finally, we want to know what are the standards, and we go to the court and we ask the court, make them tell us the standards. We all want to know. And the court has to rule by the rules the FTC makes that Congress says they can make the rules. So we have to play by the rules at this point. Hopefully we'll have some blood in our body later. And the court says, the court order, or the FTC tells us the court order provides that respondent, that's us, may not discover the legal standards the FTC has used in the past and is currently using to enforce Section 5 in data security cases. You're not supposed to know. So then they rested, which was great, by the way. I mean, so they rest their case, nothing's going on. Congress is starting to go crazy about this helicopter thing. It's not my job to tell what's going on. And suddenly they plead the fifth. Now, how are we doing on time? Oh, I better really move along. This is the most important part, I think, for you guys, but you to be the judge. So we do the investigation. We're trying to figure out what's going on. The whistleblower's coming in. He's lawyered up. He's got immunity in there. And I don't want this to be partisan, folks. I do not. This is crime. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat. I voted for both. But I will tell you, the facts are that the minority side of the House Oversight Committee blocked this. We had hard drives. They wouldn't meet Rick. They wouldn't see him. Suzanne Saxman-Grooms is the trio of cover-up here. She is a lawyer that worked for Lois Lerner at the IRS. Then she moves to House Oversight, and she's all about just keeping the lid on. Taxpayer dollars paying to protect the truth from coming out about government abuse. That's her job. That's what she does. And now she's doing it for House Oversight. And actually now she does it on the Benghazi Committee. She is very good. Because we couldn't even get them to see him because she kept dragging her feet. And then Jay Rockefeller sends out a red herring letter to the press saying, this is unbelievable. House Oversight's interfering in the FTC's regulatory process, which isn't even true. It was the judge that stopped the case to say, try to get immunity from Congress. And they stopped the case. But they want to send a red herring out to the press because, boy, we can't have the press know about this. And the press... There's not a lot of press. Investigative reporters are by and large gone. These people are working their tail off. They don't have time to research. Resources are gone. So all I do is send a red flag out there. And Elijah Cummings is passing out the letter as well. So these are all red herrings for everybody. And the whole theme is, if you don't look, you won't find. And Tyversa is talking out of both sides of their mouth. To Congress, they're pulled in and going, we're not sure of anything. But to the FTC, they're like, we found 3 more files. It's 7. And ignore the first 4 because Rick Wallace is crazy and we don't know what he did. So they're kill the messenger, divide and conquer. They're attacking him. And we want to know what the heck goes on because we could not believe there was hardly any media coverage after I testified in front of Congress. There was hardly any media coverage after an AIDS clinic got up and also testified that what was... This is amazing. I can tell this really fast because of time. But I couldn't just testify alone. We found an AIDS clinic in Chicago who was also called by Tyversa. Same amount of money, same type of racket, and they wouldn't play. So what happens? Coincidentally, there's a law firm in Pittsburgh that gets the file. And they call up the patients. Wow. And they ask them, they scare the bejeez out of these patients. They have no idea their stuff's out there, maybe because it's not. And they want to know if they'd like to participate in a class action lawsuit. They sue the AIDS clinic, and then there's a settlement. I thought that would just make the press go insane. Crickets. And so we use the Freedom of Information Act, and we find out that Edith Ramirez, who is the chairwoman of the Federal Trade Commission, and Jay Rockefeller, who is now leaving Congress, a senator from West Virginia at the time, are really tight. As a matter of fact, they're so tight that when FOIA was supposed to be fixed, broadened, repaired, whatever you want to call it, so that these games could stop of redaction and not turning over and stonewalling and making people sue, because most people can't afford to sue, the only person in Congress, regardless of party, that voted against it was Jay Rockefeller, and people went nuts. Of course they did this between Christmas and New Year's. Finally he acquiesced, but you want to know why he did? Because Edith Ramirez, through FOIA docs, was encouraging him not to fix it. They don't want transparency. Turns out she was the one notifying everyone through staff in the Congress beforehand to create this whole diversion from the hearing. And we've caught them red-handed, trying to curb their behavior, backroom tactics, and silence. And they whistle past the graveyard. And corruption is the use of trust for dishonest gain. But, thank you, Judge. See, the guy is a good guy. He's just powerless because the FTC commissioners, if they don't like his ruling, can just overturn him. You can spend millions of dollars and they can just go, don't like it, flip it. Then you have to go to court. And you saw that type of lose rate when you do that. But he, being a good guy, probably sick of having his good cases overturned, referred to the Department of Justice. And Rick got immunity in 6 weeks. First time in decades that happened. And here's Rick, the people that Tyversa try to attack because Rick is medicating himself so stressed. He's gotten a DUI. He's been in some trouble since this happened. He's imploded. That's what they do to whistleblowers, folks. They beat you up. And they change the subject and they come at you. And they make you a bad guy. Here's the bad guy getting an award from the head of the FBI a few years ago. Now, Congress, after he finally testified in May, and I got to tie this up, rather than, these are some of the quotes from the congressional report that finally were released after Rick finally testified about 10 weeks ago. This is how slow justice moves. Rather than white knight, Tyverse reports to be the company often acted unethically and sometimes unlawfully in its use of documents unintentionally exposed on peer-to-peer networks. At least one Tyverse employee, under the direction of CEO Robert Bobick, provided intentionally false information to the U.S. government on more than one occasion. 86 companies get turned over by this company, folks. Almost 100 notified by the FTC. Here we are to save the day. Bobick later provided false testimony about fabricated documents to the U.S. House of Representatives. According to the whistleblower, Tyverse fabricated the Irene IP address, downloaded and disclosed the blueprints of the president's helicopter, allegedly did so in order to receive press attention. Committee found that the statements made by Tyverse under oath about this could not be substantiated. After obtaining information HIV/AIDS patients at a clinic in Chicago, how low will you go? Really? And the FTC just stands there silently, hand in the cookie jar, quiet as a mouse, coming to no one's rescue, hoping they don't get caught. When the clinic refused to hire Tyverse, the company gave the information to a lawyer that worked with the company who filed a class action lawsuit that eventually settled for a substantial amount of money. Information provided by Tyverse to the FTC through a shell organization known as the Privacy Institute was only nominally verified, but nonetheless relied upon the FTC for enforcement actions. Nominally is right there with plausible. They obtained non-public advanced knowledge of FTC enforcement actions from which attempted to profit. They knew ahead of time. These companies thought, ooh, they're tight with the FTC. I better hire them. So they get a contract because they're kind of like crony buddies. You know, FTC likes that company. Maybe they won't come at me if I hire these guys. And by this time, the FTC lawyers are pretty beat up, but they only have one choice. This is basically the FTC, praying that no one pays attention. But the lack of evidence is disturbing. And the screaming silence to date, thank you, Black Hat, for this platform, is that there are cronies, not all, cronies, academia, privacy experts, media, big law firms who are into it for the money, attention, maybe a future job. So, you know what? Let's not tick them off on this one. It's just not big a deal. It's not big enough deal. And then the FTC dances around here in DEF CON last year and this year trying to seduce everybody. Aren't we friendly? Let's play a game. The real cybersecurity regulatory agenda of the FTC is to be the #1 self-appointed cybersecurity regulator, expand jurisdiction to medicine, technology, finance via building a portfolio of consent decrees, avoid the federal courts by persecution through process, play chicken little to Congress and the media. It's terrible. The breaches are terrible. We must get everything taken care of. We'll take care of it. And aren't they doing a fine job, by the way, especially after the OPM breach? They're not the solution. They have the wrong people overseeing cybersecurity. It's costing us a fortune. We are vulnerable. They're the predators who achieve nothing. And know that when the FTC calls you, you're not in discussion, you're not under investigation, you need to know you're under attack. So I hope the takeaway here is this. A breach is not a breach the way, legally when they come at you. So don't panic. Take your time. Because if it gets out, if you don't do your homework, you're going to have this onslaught. And, Health and Human Services didn't come at us. I actually had a privacy expert go at me when this first broke, like, that terrible man, of course. But she was intellectually honest, and she went to HHS, and they said everything was fine. And we are very close friends now because we can disagree, but she's like, oh, I was wrong, and I'll publish that, instead of skulk away. Create an incident response plan that takes in consideration the true agenda. When lawyers call, know how to handle it. They are exploiting your patriotism and belief that they're going to fight fair. They're not going to fight fair. All law firms, all security firms are not the same. When the government knocks your door, they're not on your side. Don't lose precious defense time with the naive belief that these people play clean. They don't. They will exploit your patriotism, your experience. You're smarter now. Don't fall for it. But most importantly, you guys are the solution. And they need this crowd. Everyone needs this crowd. Just like in medicine. It's never going to stop being, there's never going to be perfect security. It's never going to be, it's always going to grow. It's always going to have complexities and problems and mistakes. But if you sit there punitively and attack everybody, in medicine, everyone's just going to quit. We have to look at the big picture and we have to look collaboratively. So I'm not against the government having agencies or regulators. I just think Congress needs to pull their power and kill this administrative power so there's outside authority. So I think, 5 minutes, My God, after all that rehearsal, I finished on time. Thank you very much. So we've got about 5 minutes for questions, and I know there's press that wants to talk to me, and anyone that wants to talk to me after. There's 30 minutes in Breaker C after we finish here. So if anyone has questions and I don't get to ask them, I'll be in Breaker C for at least half an hour, and feel free to get in touch with me. So if anyone have a question, there's microphones, because we're being recorded, so you can go to the microphone and introduce yourself. Yes, sir.
Okay. Is it on?
I don't think it's on. Sir, is that mic on?
It might be. No.
Mics are not on.
So my question was, did you ever engage a professional incident response organization, not Tyverna, but another one?
We actually hired the guy, and he came in-house after. Yeah, we hired a guy in 2010. We went to Outsiders, and then he lived in Oklahoma, and he had a company out there, and then we brought him in, and he joined the company, and that's how we got WebSense in 2010. But that takes the bait. See, I don't mind us being questioned, but it takes the bait. There is no such thing as what we could have done right or wrong. They wouldn't tell us. So what good's an incident response going to do in 2008 or 9 or 10? Not that we don't have to have one. We were inspected all the time. I mean, we're expected by HIPAA. We're expected annually. We have perfect scores most of the year. And I'm not saying we're perfect, and I'm not saying we shouldn't have been better, but it takes the bait. It's not the topic. The topic is they don't tell you what you're doing wrong or what you're doing right. So how are you going to know? When we spend billions of dollars in cybersecurity, what are you going to spend it on? They won't tell you what's right or wrong. But yes, we did in 2010. Yes.
I was wondering, when you were initially contacted by this security firm, and they wanted, I've actually seen this scenario a couple times. It's become quite popular.
Unfortunately.
The way that I've handled it before is I try to bring in the FBI, get in contact with the local office and say, these people are trying to extort money from me, and then get some sort of FBI investigation. Were you able to get any sort of traction there with the FBI?
We weren't. There's some things I can't say because there's still an investigation going on, so you're going to have to forgive me, because believe me, I'll say what I can.
Yeah.
As you probably picked up. But no, at the time, it's weird. We're just a different time now. It's 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And, it's a different world. It's so different. I think we probably had more now than we do then, but then it was just like, because there's a jurisdiction issue, there's a prove it issue. We actually sued. In the book, there's a lot more. We sued them. And the Georgia court said, oh, well, there's no law about this, so we don't know if it's our jurisdiction, so we're throwing your case out for jurisdiction. So you have to sue in another jurisdiction because we have to use similar law, and similar law says it's where the perpetrator is, and the perpetrator is in Pittsburgh. Because they use telephonic law and harassment law, both of which it's where the phone is that the teleharasser is using it, it's where the harasser is. Okay. So it was tough back then. I think it'd be different now. Yes. Oh, yes. Did you have a question?
Yes, I did have a question. I live here in Las Vegas, Nevada. And my question was, obviously, a lot of what's happened, what you've described, is money-oriented and the ties to money and greed. What is the one thing that you could put in your words that would prevent a windfall of this happening in this industry?
I think the industry has to get very proactive and understand what we're dealing with and take control of it, so that they don't take control, so we're not reactive.
So definitely setting an example, like doing what you're doing and standing up for what's right.
Yeah,
for
but
sure.
I'm not a technologist. I think that technologists have tons of information. They have to speak out, and by telling story like this, I'm not the only one this has happened to. I'm just the only one that's really talked about it. And I have, again, I'm not like no government or no FTC. I mean, that's not even practical. But I do think that we have to not let any government agency, I don't care who it is, have this much centralized power, because they abuse it. Anyone abuse it. Big corporations abuse it. Anytime you get centralized power, you abuse it.
Right. And you mentioned before that there won't be any doctors anymore. What's your premise behind that?
Oh, no,
if it continues to happen.
You went, no. That was just a hyperbole. As far as if there were no physicians, if you went after only perfection as a standard,
right?
Then perfection as a standard it can't work in this level of. I mean, I actually think technology actually is where we were in medicine over 100 years ago, where we're at such an early stage and there's so much can go on. I mean, we're behind in security. We'll be ahead of security in 5-10 years. You know, but and the punitive aspect of the government coming in is not helping the situation.
So
They
do you
can't even
believe that
implement
it should remain privatized? Is that
I believe
the
it
solution?
should be both. I'm into collaboration because I think the medical regulation is very successful. It was collaborative. We felt safe.
But we
had
need to
trust.
keep them in check as well, basically.
Yeah, but they keep themselves in check because we have expertise in there. I mean, the HHS, they don't have that kind of power. Or the local regulators. I mean, it's just, you don't just let these guys make their own rules and have their own court. I mean,
Right.
it's craziness. That's the stuff that has to change. And have, I mean, the FTC has a couple technologists now, but I still think it is window dressing because I think that most of, that the lawyers have all this power and they bury this. And really, the dead have no voice. Once they've destroyed your company or their big corporation doesn't want to have any bad press, even Congress doesn't find out about it. I mean, I'm kind of surprised, as many congressional talks as I've now had and meetings, how much they want to know. It's kind of scary, actually. Did you have another question, sir?
I'll just wait till you're finished. You
Oh, I'm done.
Go
No, I've
ahead.
had personal experience with the courts as well, so I appreciate your perspective. Thank you for
Thanks.
doing
and I
this.
think we're going to have to tie up in a couple seconds here. We're
My,
about done.
my,
so.
my only question is, I came in here late. Did you mention anything about lobbyists?
No.
Okay, and you sound like a very intelligent gentleman, but I have to ask a question.
Sure.
Did you utilize all your resources to go to battle?
Are you kidding me? The company's dead.
I'm not asking that. I'm not asking that. I'm asking, did you utilize all your resources? I'm not talking about the company or money. I mean, there's leverage and there's resources. I understand your plight. I get your situation. I get your argument. I
Okay,
get your
define
battle.
resources,
But like
'cause
I'm talking about maybe resources that maybe you wish you would have gotten and tapped into over the last 3 or 4 or 5, 6, 7 years. Or you telling me you exhausted every single component of everything you
I'm
thought
sure.
you could?
I'm sure I didn't, and I shouldn't have to for a fair trial. This is not about us.
But
we're not
you
perfect.
said that they don't play fair. You should know that based on your own intelligence. You
I
should know
shouldn't
that
know- absolutely
if
not.
you're going to go into a fight with a gun, you go with a knife, you're going to lose.
Okay.
I'm just giving an analogy because you're a smart guy. I'm just asking because you seem like a very intelligent man. That's all.
Well, with all due respect, that puts a burden on the accused, and that's a scary world. If you think that's a reality, that doesn't need to be fought. That's exactly why I speak out. Because if that's true, that's got to change.
Of course it's true. We know it's
Listen,
true.
we're going to have to go. If anyone wants to go to C, I appreciate it because we got another meeting coming in. Thank you, and I appreciate all your time. Thanks a lot.